Hi, Michael.
Good evening.
I'm Deborah McManus, and this is Michael McManus, and we are on our second episode of The Road to Salvation.
That's correct.
So we have broken it down even more from three. We're going to go to four episodes for you because of this next part. And let's just get right to it. So when the last episode, we talked about you got into some trouble and you were given the choice to whether you would go to jail or you would join the army, and you said, I'm going to join the army. So
the Navy.
The Navy. Sorry,
that's okay.
The Navy, and I knew that. But anyway, so tell us a little bit about what that was, what started, what that was like.
Yeah. Well, obviously, when we ended it, I had that choice, and so I chose the Navy, but this next part that I'm going to talk about, I just wanted to be able to show people, no matter how hard times get, that God never leaves you. That we leave Him. But this was a difficult time in my life, and I just wanted to be able to express this. It's not, just so everybody knows, this is not easy for me, and I've shared it with like very few people. So but it's important. I believe it's important in my story, and it's important in my life.
And it sets you up for what happens later.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell us about, you went to the Navy.
Yes. Obviously, I went through boot camp, and then afterwards went to A school, what they call A school, for your specialty or whatever you're going into. And then ended up getting stationed out in Norfolk. I was on USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. And so I was out there for probably about 6 to 8 months. Ended up one of my higher ranking petty officers, he had an empty room, and so he decided to see if I wanted to be able to stay there, so I can live off the ship, more or less off base. But so I ended up agreeing, so I moved in with him, and it's
and he was married.
Yeah, he was married. And they did have kids, but they were grown, so none of them were, like in the house or anything.
Okay.
So, but there was, another guy that lived in there too, as well. But, and I'm not just, for the sake of everybody's privacy and everything, I'm not going to give names or anything. I just want to explain the situation.
Okay.
So, but, so I was there, probably, I want to say probably about 3 months, and I noticed that when his wife, whenever her job required her to go out of town occasionally, and I never thought nothing about it to begin with, but then I noticed that there was a certain night where she was gone, she was out of town, and he came in there. And, I was, at that time, I was assaulted for the first time. And it more or less took a lot out of me as far as, my manhood, my self-being, however you want to phrase it. But at that time, it was like, because I was a small framed man, I only weighed like 165 pounds, and he was obviously, he was taller. He was about 6'2", probably 225 pounds or something. But and it tore me up, and it seemed like, one thing was never good enough, and I had an extremely hard time with that. So
well, it affected you all the way up until we married.
Yes.
It affected you greatly.
Yes. And
self-esteem and all of that.
because a lot of times, I don't know how it is for everybody else that this has happened to, but for me, it's like, you know, you don't want to tell anybody because A, it's embarrassing, and B, you feel like less of a person or less of a man because, you know, even as we watch shows together sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see, the woman that's getting abused,
Mm-hmm.
and then we often say to each other, why do they stay in that
Mm-hmm.
relationship, or why do they go through that? And then I think back, because I allowed it to go on for more than once, and why did I, and I don't have a good answer. I think it was partially fear. I think it was, he was a high-ranking officer. I think that, it would have affected my career. So there was a lot going on, and mostly it just hurt.
Right.
A lot of nights I just wanted to leave and never come back.
Right. So later on, when you turned 21, that started 20. I'm sorry. When you turned 20, that started kind of showing itself in some negative ways. What happened?
Yeah. So we had went over to Saudi Arabia. We was in Dubai for about 10 months, and on our way back, we stopped at Palma, Spain, and it was my 20th birthday, and so, the term "drink like a sailor," you see it, but I definitely took it overboard that night. I went out with a couple of buddies of mine, and I ended up going, up to the first place we went to, and I just told the bartender, I said, line me up 21 shots of tequila. And so he's like, 21 shots? He said, why in the world do you want to? I said, well, tonight's my birthday. And he said, well, why do you want 21? So I was joking. I said, well, I don't want to grow one.
Right.
But, and I don't remember exactly how many I drank, but I know my buddies told me I got to 16 or 17, and then I was just completely out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember any of it. So all I know is, and anybody that's been in the military, they probably know what this is. But I ended up dry heaving. I was dry heaving blood. I lost, everything that was inside of me. I lost. I was dry heaving blood, and they ended up putting me in what's called a clamshell.
Mm-hmm. That's
like a gurney, half circle gurney, and they take you face down in it, and they put the other one over top. Mm-hmm. And then they strap it so you can't roll over and basically choke on your own vomit. And so when I was able to get out of that, my buddies tried to help me back to the ship, and I lost my hat, I lost my neckerchief, I lost one shoe. I was an embarrassment, to my buddies. I was an embarrassment to myself, but when times like that came up, I guess I just wanted to, numb the pain. I didn't want to have to, because when something like that happens, you relive it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I know now is the alcohol or nothing can take that away. Mm-hmm. So, and it was hard, but I was not good to my body after that. At one time, even when we came back to the States, it seemed like I was drinking probably at least 12 beers every night.
Mm-hmm.
half the time, you know, I would end up, if I had duty, I would end up going to the ship, and I'd still be buzzed, you know, and that wasn't good. Luckily, I never hurt anybody, but but it was hard. It was really, really hard.
And I mean, that's the way, and I would think that a woman would feel, and it is just to try to numb the pain, and that set you up for the rest of for a long time, for the rest of how your life was going to go.
Yes.
From that point forward, you drank pretty heavily.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the next thing we want to talk about is when you met your first wife, April. Right. So this was another situation that you kind of put yourself into. I think you've told me before that, you know, you didn't feel worthy and didn't think anybody would ever want you, right, because in your own head, everybody knew.
Right.
And so in your own head, you were just unworthy and all that stuff. But what happened? How did you meet April?
Well, she was cousin. Her cousin was dating a friend of mine on the ship. He was in a different area, and so he was like, "Hey, you know, I'm dating this girl, and her cousin is single, and you know, you should write her, and you know, she get in touch and stuff." So basically, at that time, I was like, you know, hey, yeah, I said, I'll write her. What's it gonna hurt? It's not like, you know, probably not gonna write me back anyway, because it just seemed crazy. But so I did. You know, I wrote, and then you know, she wrote back, and you know, in my next letter or whatever, I ended up, you know, sharing my phone number, and so we started talking back and forth on the phone for several hours at a time, a lot of time. And then I would end up, you know, I was going to have surgery, and it was going to be, you know, about 30 days away. Well, I ended up, at that time, I ended up, you know, buying her engagement ring before I even met her in person. And I even called and told her on the phone, like, probably, I think it was like a week before I had the surgery. And so, maybe it was 2 weeks. Time slips by, but, and so she, you know, she took a Greyhound bus all the way to Norfolk from Ohio, and she, you know, showed up after I'd had surgery, and you know, we decided at that time, I said, you know, because she was only going to be there for like a couple of weeks, and I just told her, I said, well, you know, I don't want you to have to go back. You know, I want you to stay here with me. So I'm going to drive you back, and we're going to get married, and then you can come back and be with me. And so basically, you know, that's what we done. And then once we got back, you know, obviously started wanting to have our own place. So we got our own place, and it was in Norfolk. But because of my surgery that I couldn't be on the ship, so they had to put me on a station somewhere where I could be on land, because I wouldn't be able to go out to port or out to sea. And so ended up putting me in Oceana, and ended up, you know, working in a tool room and stuff. But it seemed, you know, I was working the night shift, and she was pregnant with our first child, and so she ended up, you know, she would call me and she would tell me, you know, that there was, you know, guys banging on the window and threatening her and stuff like that, and so I would change, you know, I talked to my CO about changing shifts, and so, you know, I would change shifts to try to accommodate, to see, but it seemed like things were happening while I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day I got a phone call, and she said she had been, punched in the stomach
Mm-hmm.
while she was taking the trash out. She was bleeding heavily, and so she had to go to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So I told them, I said, well, she's going to the hospital, this, that, and the other. They said, well, first off, you have to go through all this paperwork before you can leave. You can't just leave off your shift without going through all this paperwork, and it took an additional 4 hours. And, she was already at the hospital by the time I got there. They said she had lost the baby. And so it kind of set the tone as to what happened next in my life.
Okay.
And so after that, I was still trying to change shifts again to accommodate, because she was saying they were still stalking her, bothering her, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finally just got to the point, and I said, I need to leave, and I need to go check on my wife. I need to go do this. And they were just saying, you can't just keep doing that. I said, well, what can y'all do to help protect her? This, that, and the other. And so they ended up, they were like, you're just going to, we're going to stay on this shift. We can't change you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Which now I understand. But at the time, I was just mad because I wanted to be able to, protect. So I decided, I told them, I said, I even went to the officers that I need to go to. I told them, so I just want out of the military then. I said, because nothing is getting done, and this continues over here. And so I just want to get out.
So in between that, did the marriage was kind of doomed from the beginning? You guys had a lot of issues from day one.
Yeah.
So I think the way I read it, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you kind of, you felt like you were more or less forced to be with her to make her happy because
Right.
you wanted your marriage to work.
Right. And it was a situation where, I was always, seemed like she was, always trying to call me at work, always trying to, it seems like, like she always wanted me to be there with her. And of course, nothing's going to work out if you're constantly, always doing a situation like that. And, and there was, some incidences that occurred, where there was, some physical things that she would do to me if things didn't go right. Screaming and yelling. It's just some mental stuff that was going on, mental abuse, and throughout the the whole thing, it started out rough, but I was going to try to make it work.
Right.
And we did have 4 children together, and of course, I love all my children, but it seemed like that was the reason why I ended up trying to make it work for so long.
Okay, and you were young. I mean, things, and you have a background and a history, so I'm sure it wasn't very easy to try to lose a relationship that you didn't think you were going to have in the first place.
Right.
So before we go on, I want to touch on just a little bit about you had, before that, you'd won some medals and some things like that.
Yeah, I got a letter of accreditation from the commanding officer of the ship, and I was, I was awarded what they called, I was part of a Tiger team, which we did a lot of rehauling of some stuff on the ship, and I had a certificate from the captain, William Cross, and I had service medals. I had a sharpshooter ribbon from where I trained on the 45, and so even though I was in there a short amount of time, I took a lot of pride in what I did.
Right.
And then even that got stripped from me.
Right. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So it ended up that you left.
Yes.
So how did you leave?
Well, I just went home one day after I had went and talked to 4 different people, and they all said, "No, we just need to think about it. Just need to think about it." I said, "I don't want to think about it anymore. I want out."
Mm-hmm.
And so nobody said anything. So I went home, and I said, I got the weekend. We're just gonna pack up and we're gonna move to Ohio.
So you went AWOL.
I went AWOL.
Which was a regret, I understand.
Which is probably the dumbest thing I've done in my life.
Right. It was a regret.
One of the dumbest things.
Well,
and
we all do dumb things. It
is a big regret because there's a lot of stuff that I missed out on.
Mm-hmm.
I could have been a 38-year-old man retiring
mm-hmm.
from the military. And
that regret is wasted. Just wasted time.
And here's the thing. I was surrounded by a lot of good guys that did surround me. And, Thomas, Casey Ewers, these guys were more or less, they were my rock.
Mm-hmm.
They were there. And we did everything together. And we'd even talked about, hey, next time we re-enlist, we'll just all travel together wherever we go. So it's not like I didn't like the military, because I did love to travel. And I did love being able to be secure in what I was doing.
Okay. Well, how did you get caught? Because you did get caught.
Yes. So she was 8 months pregnant with our second child, which was the second child she was carrying, which was our firstborn,
mm-hmm.
Austin. And then about 8 months pregnant. And, I had my mom, she knew where I was at. She knew where I was staying. And she kept telling me, she said, she'd say, Michael Shane. Of course, she always used my first 2 names when she was mad or wanted to get a point across. So she'd say, Michael Shane, you just need to turn yourself in and get this over with. You don't need to be running from the law for the rest of your life. And I didn't listen.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, no. I'm just working on the table. Of course, now I look back and you can't hide from the government ever. But I did, I thought I could. I thought I'd just be able to work on the table and do different things.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I got caught, and they came into the little town of Gratis, Ohio, and they were just,
Well, you just didn't get caught. Somebody informed on you.
Yeah, my mom.
Yeah.
My mom called and told them exactly where I was at.
Right.
And so she, at the time I was mad.
Mm-hmm.
I could have bit nails in 2. But when I look back at it, she did the right thing.
Right.
So, and so they took me.
Mm-hmm.
Took me to the jail. They watched me in the jail overnight. Ended up going to, that was the county jail. Ended up going to the airport the next day, and was totally embarrassed because I had to walk to the airport with handcuffs on, and ended up flying all the way back to Norfolk, and they threw me in the brig.
And how long were you in the brig?
I was actually in the brig for about 30 days, and then.
You said that was worse than.
Oh, that was the worst 30 days of my life. That was worse than boot camp. It's like jail and boot camp combined. I mean, you still had to get up every day. You still had to shave. You still had to follow rules. I mean, you had to be account for your fork and where you laid it. Yeah, all your stuff, everything. It was, yeah, no, I don't want to ever do that again either. So,
So what happened when you got out? What happened?
so I ended up, finally they gave me an option. They said that if you wanted to stay in, you would have to be in restriction for a certain amount of days until until we decide that you'd be able to get out and finish the rest of your term. So they said, or you can get out and you're going to be, other than honorable discharge. So I chose that option because when she was 8, almost 9 months pregnant, and of course I wanted to be out so I could see my baby born. So
Okay.
so then I was out legally now of the military, and headed back to Ohio.
And in Ohio is when you met her family.
Yeah, well, obviously, we were married at that time, so I had met their family before.
Well, got ingratiated.
Right, yeah. But there were certain things that were going on, and more or less, I felt challenged because there was certain stealing gas and stuff like that. And I had even called because we were on the way back from Norfolk. This was in the beginning before I went through all the other stuff. I forgot to mention this, but we were on our way back from Norfolk. I was about out of gas, probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where they live. Needed some gas money, and they basically said, called me a name and said, just gas and go. And so that's where I started.
And just to be fair, the family was they did things that weren't appropriate, weren't
right.
But
I made the decision.
But you made the decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I don't blame them for it at all. I lay all the blame on me because I should have been man enough to just, take care of my business.
Right.
And so, but that was one thing that led to another. And so, it started out as gas, and then, was when babies were born and stuff, ended up, stealing diapers, ended up going through, just several different things. Anything that I could do. And then at one point, it was like we were taking, I was taking stuff and then, returning it to a certain store and then getting a gift card, and you turn around and you sell the gift card and get money for it. And that's,
and that's how you were existing for quite a while.
I just kept doing
that. And then you went from jail to jail.
Yeah.
Because you weren't the brightest criminal in them.
I don't really think there is any brilliant criminals.
Well, you were not the brightest.
I was definitely not.
But you went from jail to jail for stealing and cold check writing and things like that. And this all culminated into this one incident. So what happened with that?
Yeah, it was the last place we were in Lexington, Kentucky. But I mean, I had several charges from Georgetown, different areas like that. But this one particular place where we were staying, I'd write a check on a closed account because at that time I knew nothing could get processed that quickly. And they would call back and say, "Hey, it got returned." I said, "I don't know what's going on with the account. I'll look into it and I'll get back to you." And so I put it off long enough, then I moved somewhere else. When we ended up in Lexington, this is where it all ended. And so when got that, we was in Lexington at that last place, and I knew things were not going right. So I was like, we need to get a U-Haul and get all this stuff out of here again. And so I did. I got a big truck, loaded everything up, had everything loaded. Literally bringing the last thing out of the house to get in the vehicle and leave, and then here comes the cops around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I thought it was going to be like it always was, you know. I'd be in there a few days, and then I'd end up getting out, and I'd be able to, you know, straighten stuff out again or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
Nope. The judge told me that I wasn't going anywhere. That I had been on the run for quite a few years, and that it was time for me to sit down. And he admitted it.
Yeah. But you were going to just stay in county.
I was supposed to stay in county because it was a Class D felony. So, which in the state of Kentucky is the lowest felony. And I was going to be able to stay there because it would be a Class D facility. But went out and was playing basketball and stuff. Ended up fracturing my ankle playing ball. So then they couldn't house me there for medical reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So then they sent me to Kentucky State Reformatory, which is KSR.
And that's where we're going to be stopping.
Yes.
Today, we kind of discussed and touched on some things that were pretty difficult for you to talk about. We
Right.
really appreciate you sharing that. And it is truly a phenomenal story. If you could go on for days, there's a lot that we had to leave out, and that you could talk about for days just with your marriage.
And there's a lot of things, even, that I have explained to you before and told you about that, I kind of laugh at it. And we kind of laugh together about
Mm-hmm.
it. But I know where it's at now.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the past.
Right.
But, it's just like me, and I told you the one time about, I told the judge asked why I was trying to take the stuff out of Walmart, whatever, and I told him because I was invisible. Who even says that? I mean,
But there was a reason behind that.
There was things going on, yeah.
Right. You really did feel invisible.
I did at the time.
And not in a good way.
Not in a good way, no.
Well, we thank you for joining us for the Road to
Yes.
Salvation, and we hope that you'll tune in next time when we talk about his prison experience, and just write out afterwards, and then we'll be discussing up till now what's really changed his life, the Lord coming into his life.
That's
and
right.
Him praying and getting saved.
Amen.
So
That's right.
and where he is now. So thank you for staying with us, and we hope that you'll join us next time.
Thank you.